Hello and welcome to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. We have an action-packed show for you today as we will visit with the president of the St. Louis Cardinals, Bill DeWitt III, and also several executives involved with the team as they discuss new construction taking place at Ballpark Village. And we'll explore a few local programs for kids and underprivileged that the Redbirds support. Plus, former football great Irv Goode will be in studio to discuss his career, share some stories about the old Big Red here, and talk about his upcoming induction into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. Plus, STL TV's Melanie Steen has a follow-up story about how boxing is making a positive impact on the youth of our city. So stay with us for this and much more coming up next on Inside Sports. Just across the mighty Mississippi River in Madison, Illinois, the Gateway Motor Sports Park and Worldwide Technology have recently announced a long-term naming rights. The complex is now named Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. Curtis Francois, the CEO of Gateway Motorsports, was recently quoted saying, "The support of WWT will help ensure that our track will compete for North America's most elite races and offer an innovative and exhilarating fan experience for years to come." In other news, Worldwide Technology and Enterprise have recently released artist renderings of the proposed MLS soccer stadium to be located just west of Union Station. This comes on the heels of a recent announcement by Major League Soccer that they will be expanding to 30 teams. So with the support of the city, the state, business community, and our region's rabid sports fans, St. Louis has positioned themselves well to bring the MLS to the Lou. And while our corporate citizens are bringing their A game to the region's major league sports scene, Inside Sports reporter Melanie Steen has a follow-up story on how boxing programs here in St. Louis are benefiting our youth.
Since we first brought you the story of brothers Montrez and Montez McIntyre, some exciting news. Montrez competed in the first round of the 2019 Junior Olympic Regionals, which was held in Topeka, Kansas. Montrez won that bout and will move on to the next round, which is being held in Wisconsin.
I want to pursue it as an adult, work so I can turn pro.
Remember this face right here. This is going to be a world champion. Out of the 700 kids that I've had, you learn to look for talent. And you learn the knack of what to look for. When he was 8 years old, when he come in here, and the first time he got in the ring, I knew he was special.
Fifth grader Montrez McIntyre has been in the boxing program just a couple of years and hasn't competed a whole lot. But win or lose, he gives credit to Coach Tracy. Coach Tracy, what's it like to work with him?
Good,
How?
because he teach me good stuff.
Meanwhile, older brother Montez McIntyre also advanced in the regionals. So did fellow boxer Davion Smalls. So what do these young men all have in common? A very dedicated coach, both in and outside the ring.
Initially, I came just to coach. Then from interacting with the kids, I saw there was other needs. Some kids could barely read, and so took them next door, got them involved with the tutors next door. Then there are other social issues where we got social workers involved. When you get the kid, you get all the baggage that come with it. And once you're able to get that unraveled, you get to the true kid, and usually you can get a good fighter, boxer, you get the discipline and everything with it.
Coach Tracy is a former boxer himself who's worked with kids of all ages. His youngest is 7, but the oldest he's worked with is 54. He's been training kids and kids at heart at the Dunmarquette Recreation Center for the past 5 years. And in that short amount of time, he's worked with more than 700 of them. What does it take to be a good boxer, a good fighter?
Absolute discipline. You have to want to do it, but more so discipline. And then you have to have that spirit inside of you. You can take a person, you can train anybody. Anyone, you can train anyone, but they have to have that thing on the inside that wants to be a champion, and you can't teach that.
Currently, Coach Tracy is working with around 30 kids, which includes only a handful of girls. But his boxing skills are in demand. So is what he brings to the kids outside the ring. He tells me he's received phone calls from some St. Louis area school principals and those involved in the juvenile system.
I got a couple of officers over there who call me, Coach Tracy, I got a kid for you. Can you work with him? And it's hard to say no to a kid, you know? So somebody has to do it.
And it is that winning attitude that makes Coach Tracy hard to beat. I'm Melanie Steen reporting for Inside Sports.
Well, boxing is a great way to learn discipline, burn energy, and gain recognition. Thanks, Melanie. Well, the two-time national champion St. Louis Surge women's basketball team has hired a new head coach for the 2019 season. DeWitt Henderson played NCAA basketball at the University of Iowa and is also the assistant women's coach at WashU under his wife, Randy. STL TV is a big supporter of the Surge and owner Kalia Collier, and we look forward to the team's 2019 season. The team's home opener is Saturday, June 8th at the Field House on the campus of Washington University. Well, Inside Sports recently had a chance to visit Busch Stadium and Ballpark Village and had an opportunity to speak with team executives and witness firsthand construction at Ballpark Village. There's some really cool things going on at Busch Stadium with the Cardinals. Let's take a look.
You know, we like to think of it as Cardinal Nation, you know, and we draw from a wide area, you know, several states, and so we tried to give back not only in the St. Louis metropolitan area, but all over. You know, I talked about our grants earlier, and some of our grants, we give grants out to organizations in Arkansas and things of that nature from all over. Our grants go to other nonprofits that support kids, and it's not just kids in the St. Louis community, it's kids that are part of Cardinal Nation.
So I think fans are excited. The team sort of started out hitting a little slow in the spring and then turned it on, and we've got great pitching depth and some young up-and-comers. So that part of it, we're all excited about. I think so too. You know, St. Louis is just a unique baseball town. I mean, we're not a big market, but we act like it because our fans are so good, and they come and they're great with their season tickets. They're great with their support of watching the product on FSN. And then we get a lot of travelers coming in on the summer weekends, and it sort of makes us feel like we're bigger than we are.
Our special guest today in studio played 13 seasons in the NFL, 11 with the football Cardinals, where he was selected first-team All-Pro twice. And as a member of the Miami Dolphins, he won a Super Bowl. He will soon be enshrined into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. At this time, we welcome Irv Goode to Inside Sports. Irv, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I see, is that your Super Bowl ring?
It's a Super Bowl ring back in the days.
Yeah, you want to put it up there for a second?
They're a little bit smaller.
A little bit smaller. They're not quite as gaudy back then.
The ones today are about twice the size, and the guys don't wear them.
Yeah, I know Coach Hanifan likes to sport his.
Oh, he has his.
He's got them all over the place, hasn't he?
We were at a deal the other night, and I took one of his rings and exchanged it for my ring, and he got it back, and he was like this, and he, you know, he was about panicked knowing that he didn't have his ring.
Yeah, he could probably do curls with his
stuff. Yeah.
So you're an old Kentucky boy, a bluegrass native, huh?
Yeah, Kentucky Wildcat.
You know, I guess, did you grow up in and around that area?
Born and raised in Newport, Kentucky, which is near Covington and across from Cincinnati, Ohio.
All right.
And only about an hour, a little hour and 15 minutes down to the school. So
I guess the head coach down there in Kentucky saw something he liked in you, and they brought you in to be a Wildcat.
Well, I think Blanton Collier at the time, and everybody knew or knows of Blanton Collier and that. He was with the Cleveland Browns for years and won he won the championship with the NFL with them for a year, and then won, and it was second place, I think, a couple of times, and then came down to Kentucky and that. And so you could look at all the coaches at that time, and as assistant coaches, we had a lot of coaches that went on into the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, I know the basketball program there is revered, but you must have had some pretty good football teams because you were drafted in the first round by the St. Louis Football Cardinals in 1962. I believe it was 12th overall. And that's a pretty big accomplishment coming into the Big Red and Bill Bidwell.
Well, it was through a trade that they had.
Oh, no kidding.
They had their first choice was like 8th or 9th, and they took Fade Eccles out of Northwestern University, and then they traded up with Philadelphia, who traded up with the Washington Redskins. It's kind of like watching it in today's world. You know, you get all of these trade ups and trades downs to get the people that you want.
It's like, you know, someone's still going to be there because they need a quarterback, so they're not going to take a lineman, so they can kind of switch around. So that's what happened. Well, you ended up in St. Louis, and back at the time, you were playing in Sportsman's Park.
Yes.
Before the Busch Stadium opened in
Yeah.
1966.
Yeah.
Talk about Sportsman's Park, because everybody talks about the Browns and the Cardinals and Sportsman's Park. Brian Clark sung a song he wrote about Sportsman's Park, a couple of shows ago. What was it like playing at the old?
Well, I think there were like 40,000 seats there, and about 15,000 were behind posts and all that kind of stuff. So it was, and it was the baseball. They didn't have anything to put down. There was no AstroTurf or any of that stuff. So it was muddy in a lot of the games and that, but it was really crazy because there's a lot of businesses up that way, Mallinckrodt right around the corner and that type of thing. And on Saturdays, we would go in early, like at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then we would have practice at 10, warm up for the game on Sunday. And we'd always stop at this bar before we went in
For
practice to get some coffee. And,
Oh, sure, yeah.
to get some coffee and that, and there would be these people from the night shift sitting in there, and the bar was jammed. I mean, it was right across from the stadium and that, and of course all the people then were drinking the beer and then putting a shot of whiskey in the beer type of thing. So, we always thought that was awesome. That kind of got us going a little bit.
Do you ever spike your coffee before
I
practice?
don't think so.
No? I mean, back in the day, I've seen pictures of like Len Dawson smoking a cigarette, on the sideline, when the defense was out on the field.
Yeah, well, Charlie Johnson did, a quarterback that played with the Cardinals and that, and he smoked a cigarette at halftime and that. His locker was right across from mine, and I could never watch him do it because it drove me nuts.
Did it drive you nuts?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's unheard of today.
But, yeah, well, it's rules now. You've got some rules that kind of keep you from doing some of those things.
So Sportsman's Park, that was obviously the great memories from Sportsman's Park.
It was, and one of the games I was talking about muddy was when it was a tie against the New York Giants, and Wyatt Tittle was the quarterback, and it was so muddy and rainy, and the second half we went out and had to put the ball on a towel or else it would blow away. There was so much water on the field, and you'd make a block or whatever it is, and then you're trying to get up, and there was a flute. The band still was at halftime, and they lost like 2 flutes. There were like 2 or 3 pair of shoes that were all in the mud. It was funny.
So I guess Busch Stadium, when it opened in 1966 with the AstroTurf, that was quite a change for you.
Well, it was quite a change in that, and actually, before they even put it in, we were kind of the guinea pigs on it. They put in a 50 by 50 field for us to practice on and that and get used to it. And the only problem with it at the time that it didn't have like cross sections of plastic or anything. It just kind of like a shag rug or a shag carpet. And if it rained, then that kind of fell over a little bit. Well, when you're pooling, if you're against that bend, you have some really good grip going on with your cleats. If you're going the other way, then you're slipping and sliding like crazy.
So would you like AstroTurf or natural field better?
It really gave you a better playing area, I think, and speed, and that's what kind of put the game forward quite a bit. But the AstroTurf itself, your ankles and your legs and your knees are so sore and beat up after a game. It's crazy.
It's the turnaround time, and
yeah.
Advances in medicine since then are incredible. I remember watching Brian's song, and Gale Sayers was a favorite player of mine.
Right.
But you see, like when you give an ACL injury back then, you'd have a cut on your leg about this long, and it seems like the ACL would heal before the skin would heal back then. Could you talk maybe a little bit about the advances in medical technology back then? Because if you get something like that, I mean, you might be done.
Well, I think most like a total replacement on a knee, and that I saw a gal this morning in therapy, and she had just had hers 3 months ago, and she was walking without a cane or anything, and without a limp or whatever. Where back in '99 is when I had mine done, and at 3 months I was still on a cane and limping and that type of thing. They're less evasive now, and they do with their techniques and that they don't take those clamps and pull and yank stuff away as much as they do now. So,
did you have to work an off-season job back
yes,
in those days?
definitely.
Where'd you work? What'd you do in the
Definitely.
off-season?
I did a little bit of everything, but I had a sporting goods store at one time called Goode Sporting Center down in Maplewood, and sold hard stuff. And at the time, hard stuff was shotguns, pistols, fishing gear, rods, reels, and that type of thing. I didn't have anything to do with the basketball things with the high school where you bid on all of their equipment and stuff like that. I didn't do any of that. And
So you're like the original Johnny Mac, huh?
yeah, and the gun thing, and the gun thing is what really I had to get rid of, or got rid of the store and that, because that's when they came back, and if you bought a gun, I would have people that would buy 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 guns a year, and after these things came in where they had to fill out this form, and that for the federal government, and that those same people would only buy 1 or 2 guns.
That's funny.
So I got out of that business.
Got out of that. Well, we're with Irv Goode, going into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, and we're going to take a little break and go to our Inside Sports Flashback. Then we're going to come back to Irv, for a second half of our interview. But right now, we will go to our Inside Sports Flashback back to 2005 with former NFL Coach Jim Hanifan. Let's take a look. I guess so instrumental in some of the great, most famous offensive lines in NFL history. The Cardinals line being one of them, with Dan Dierdorf, Conrad Dobler, Tom Banks, George Young, Fitty, all these guys. I did speak with Dan Dierdorf the other night, and he wanted me to ask you one question. Who was your favorite, him or Conrad Dobler?
Oh, I can't answer that, because I'm going to tick off one or the other. As a matter of fact, I get that comment all the time, not just between Dan and Conrad, but who was my very favorite player? Who was the best player I ever had, and all that. I go, hey, hold it. A lot of them brought a lot to the table, in different ways. So in Dan and Conrad's case, the same thing is true. Now, if one wants to pay me more, then hey, that's another thing. We can work that out.
Well, Conrad used to say, did he say, Dan's your favorite? That's why you're always yelling at me or something.
Oh, yeah. No, on the grades. See, Conrad would get ticked off because all of a sudden Dan would get a better grade than he. And he'd go, you like him more. That's the whole thing. He sucks up to you. He, all this and that bit. So, on and on and on and on. And it's been like that ever since. And I mean, even to this day, right now, he'll call me on the phone. Conrad will. Do you like me better? Whatever. But we all have a great time with it, and we have a lot of fun, and which is part of the whole thing, the camaraderie that you get from playing the game or coaching the game and so forth. These fellas obviously were great players. They're great players for me, just like the Hogs back in D.C., Russ Grimm, Joe Jacoby, Jimmy Lachey, fellows like that, and the fellows here, Orlando Pace, Adam Timmerman, Andy McCollum, on and on. Those guys. But as time goes on, you become, rather than the coach-player relationship, you go father-son maybe a little bit, and then all of a sudden everybody else has got gray hair, so you all become brothers.
Now you guys are brothers. Yeah. Now that's a different game from the 1970s to today. You hear all the stories about Conrad Dobler. Dan Dierdorf's in the Hall of Fame, but Conrad Dobler had this reputation where he would like bite people under the piles and scratch them. I mean, is it a different game then? And did he really do all that stuff? And was he the meanest player?
Yeah, he really did. He really did. It comes out now. I mean, come out of the closet, Conrad, and tell the truth. That he really, truly did do that. But I'll say this: what he did. He had tremendous passion for the game, great passion for the game. I'd like to line up and have 45 Conrad Doblers. I'll guarantee you, we'd be looking at a ring on your finger, baby.
How about that? I know you got to actually cross over with Dan Dierdorf coming out of Michigan, highly touted. I'm sure Dan, he was an awesome player. I got to see him play. Did you ever, cross paths with Hanifan? I know you talked about Hanifan. You see him at some of the events. What are your thoughts about what Hanifan just said?
Well, there's still a lot of ball players here living in St. Louis from the Rams and from the Cardinals playing. So we have meetings and we do some things together for our golf tournament and raise some money for kids and things. And it's just in Hanifan. I just saw him 2 days ago. He was out at the golf tournament and that, and he just always has stories and stuff, and you don't ever want him to get up and speak at a group meeting or whatever it is, because he doesn't shut up. He'll talk for an hour.
He'll go on and on.
Talk for an hour and say, whatever you do, don't invite him to say anything. But he usually just comes up and say, well, I'm going to go up and say something anyway.
You got to do it anyway. So who were some of the Conrad Dobler? I saw the Sports Illustrated thing there, the NFL's dirtiest player. Dierdorf was a very good player. Who were some of the tough battles that you had to go up against on the offensive line? I mean, there was quite a few fantastic linebackers back in that day.
Well, it was linebackers and defensive tackles and that, because I played guard most of the time, and they. And the rules have changed so much. I remember playing against Roger Brown, and they were allowed to club you with their hands like that. Well, he took off and just slugged me one time, and my face mask splashed against my face, and I had to come out of the game for him to take that off and put another one on. And I went back in the game, and I said, "Hey, what the heck's going on?" I said, "You're not allowed to slug anybody." And he said, "Shut up." He said, "That was my left hand." So
that wasn't even a penalty, probably.
No, they didn't even see it. They didn't call it, but that's what happened a lot of times.
The Deacon Jones head slap.
Tody Smith of Dallas. He and I got in a fight 2 of the 4 games that we played against each other, and you get kicked out of the game. But at the time, for $250, it was worth it.
Yeah, no kidding. So who were your big rivals back then? I know.
Well, it was Bob Lilly with Dallas. Dallas was our rival, and they played a flex defense, which meant that one tackle was up this far from your head, and the other tackle was playing off, and it just takes a little bit. It took us a year. It should have taken us just films to notice what they're doing, but it really took us a year to decide on what it was, and it was kind of like a 6-man defense. Which put more pressure on their linebackers, but they had some great linebackers. So, but there were times when I would pull and Lilly would be in that up position. He'd be running right alongside of me. I wasn't looking for anybody to block. I was just hoping to trip him, or
just kind of keep him out of the way.
Yeah.
Who are some of the greatest players that you got to block for and play with on the Big Red and the Dolphins?
Well, I think Jim Hart is the quarterback, and Johnny Rowland. When Rowland first signed, he signed a humongous contract, and we were all kind of upset about it a little bit, and that. And I know our first game that we played, and he ran the kickoffs back, and he ran the first one back for a touchdown. We love you, Johnny.
It was okay then.
You make whatever you want, type of thing.
So Joe Namath was drafted by the Cardinals.
Yes.
And he said no.
Well, St. Louis is a great town. I've lived here now since 1962, but it wasn't his kind of a town. He needed the New York or Los Angeles or someplace like that.
One of the bright lights.
Yeah, with the bright lights and the parties and all that kind of stuff and that. So.
Let's talk about the parties. You know, I'm sure the Big Red in St. Louis, they like to party. I mean, you know, Jim Hart had parties. Some of these guys, you know, what was it like back in the day?
Well, we all did, and most of it was, you know, Falstaff was actually our biggest sponsor at the time, because Falstaff promised 15,000 seats, I think, in a stadium and that, and I worked for Falstaff in the off seasons, and that where I would go all over the state and Illinois and whatever, and speaking engagements and show our highlight film and drink some beer. You know?
Let's move on to your exit from St. Louis. You had 2 Pro Bowls here in St. Louis, so why in the heck did the Cardinals let you go?
Well, at the time in that, it was my 12th year, and I think after they had gotten Deerdorf, I played with him 1 year, and I think they were wanting some to make some changes, more so in
young blood.
In the younger blood, and yeah, and DeMarco left 2 years before I did, and about the only guy that was still there was Ernie McMillan when Deerdorf and him did so well. So you had a cup of coffee in Buffalo, and I guess you got hurt. Got hurt in Buffalo,
and then you did bang. And next thing you know, you're playing on a Super Bowl team. Talk about the Miami Dolphins, your Super Bowl year, and why Don Shula is so special.
Well, what happens in that, you go into the season with 6 or 7 offensive linemen, and that's some of the other 2 linemen that can play several positions in that. And if somebody gets hurt, it really puts some pressure on you, and that's what happened with the. It was really weird, because I was up in Buffalo, and our center got in fight with a defensive tackle, and he tore the defensive tackle legs or all to pieces or whatever it was. So Buffalo needed a tackle. Same practice in Miami, the center and the tackle got hurt, and just the opposite happened in it. So Miami was looking for a center and an offensive lineman, and Buffalo was looking for a tackle. So
you got a ring, and
so was that it? I went to practice the next day to say, you don't have to get dressed. You're traded to Miami, and you have to make practice this afternoon. So I called my wife, and she drove to the airport, threw a bunch of stuff in a bag for me, and I flew off that afternoon and made practice down in Miami.
What about the Super Bowl? It was a tremendous feeling.
It's
a
awesome.
Different era then, but it was still the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was, and it was a lot of fun, and it wasn't near as big as it is now. And that we actually played in the field down in Houston, and but it was fun, and it was just awesome. Zonka got the rushing record for the Super Bowl at the time, and to show you how much it's changed, we threw 11 passes.
The whole game?
The whole game.
That's amazing.
11 passes.
Now, do you get to go to the Miami Dolphins? Do you attend like the Super Bowl reunions and things like that?
I get the invitations every year. I just say I haven't done it.
Well, congratulations. Well deserved. 2 All-Pros
and
a Super Bowl with the Dolphins.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, among those joining Irv in the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame 2019 induction ceremony include former referee Rich Hantak, hoopsters Gary Buchanan and Scott Highmark, along with former Redbirds Jerry Royce and Tommy Herr. Also a big shout out to Scott Rowland, Jason Isringhausen, and Mort Cooper, who will be enshrined into the Cardinals Hall of Fame later this year. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks for watching Inside Sports. We'll see you next time.